Hi, everybody. Well, up here in Canada, we've had a pretty beautiful, almost like a summer day. And I don't want to make anybody jealous or anything, but I'm assuming that all across probably Canada and the US, we've had some interesting weather, um, from snow to all kinds of other things, hail, rain. But we're having a beautiful day. I hope you are. There's a question here that I would like to try and answer. It's from Sonia Migam from Ottawa. And it has a connection with probably a whole lot of things that many people are attempting to deal with. And so we have to look at it maybe from a kind of a broader point of view. She tells me a dream, which I think is fairly personal, and I'd like not to mention the dream. But a dream implies that within us all, there is a tremendous amount of love. And within us all, there's also actions that could be called good and could be called not so good. Usually the verbiage we use is related to being bad versus good. Evil or vile, I like the word vile better than anything, versus being really loving. And in fact, these words are very much involved with a context. And if one thinks that there is only one kind of or relative form of love, then in fact we're not looking at it from a perspective that relates to anything other than our own personalizations. And that means that what I mean by that is a person has definitions about what love would be and how it should be and why it should be that way. And often not even why it should be that way. It's like taking a look at a Rembrandt and calling it junk because it doesn't really satisfy what you think good should be. It's very interesting that this question comes up quite often, but it comes up in a very particular way. And this is a very fascinating way of engaging with a question. Sonia had a dream which related to a person being involved with both good and not so good, and then realizing that that was internally okay because that's part of our condition. No one is ideally loving all the time. It's a flaw in our ointment. We look at things as if we should be, or we must be, and we don't understand what loving is. So let me talk a little bit about that. And remember, this is my perspective, so seeing if we can understand that part. A personality has many aspects, many traits, many ways of seeing the world. And some of them, actually, most of them are involved with the cultivations that we've had from the time of our birth. And there are family rules and regulations, and there are city rules and regulations, country rules, cultural rules. And we try to semi-fit into those in some form that relates directly to what we have been trained to think and also what we've learned to think. We don't see ourselves as a multi-leveled being because traditionally we don't talk about ourselves that way. Except we do say, well, I've been very emotional, or I've been very thoughtful, or I've been very physical this week, or however we engage with it. And in fact, what we're really talking about there is that we have boundaries in and around us that relate to those words. They're not really basically as real as what we believe. We are interactive with them all the time. And there's interconnection between those words, physical, emotional, and mental. Personality is another word that is related to the coming together of these, in theory, three things. We even stop ourselves from saying that the personality is involved with us being spiritual as well. But it is, because within that whole construct, that energetic construct that has propensities within reference zones that we usually, when we're talking about our body, that's physical. It's what we say, it's physical. Emotions affect us physically. The way we think affects us physically. The way we present some kind of form affects us mentally, emotionally, and physically. It's cyclical. We're interactive, pulsating all the time as an energy form. Yet we don't realize that there are boundaries that we have in those three structures. The way we think of them, the way we respond or feel to them, the way we physically react to them, based on our nervous system and our brain. And we're not talking about that spiritual stuff yet, but let's talk about that spiritual stuff too. Well, within us, we have a system that is basically transmigrational, one could say. In other words, you have lived many lives, you will live many lives. Now, it doesn't matter if you believe that. It still happens. That's annoying, because we should only have happened to us what we believe. I'm thankful that that's not true, because we have a certain way of seeing things. And this way of seeing things actually creates kind of a ridge where intensity accumulates in the physical form. And I'm trying to do this two-dimensionally. I apologize for that, because if I do it three-dimensionally, then I have to talk about waves of expression moving in. If you express, that's a wave of expression that interacted and closed off your thinking and only focused on how you functionally engage in your personality, the way you're focused on yourself because you're in pain or vulnerable, or whatever in you creates that oof in you. Well, that sounds like tonal representation here, and in a kind of a way, you're right. But what gives you that capacity also is an act of love so broad that whatever you need it for, it comes through those chakra systems, from my perspective, or Sephiroth, comes in and you use it. It's almost just in oscillation, almost there. And when you intensify or express, you push it in a direction that moves towards the boundary of what you believe you must be involved with to express the you that you call your name. So there are ridges, or let's say, areas where you don't go past, and some where you do go past, and some where you can't go past. But all of that is an engagement with life as you live it, period. As you live it, it's there. You are a form who's attempting to make sense of what you're doing, and that presents you with something that you can see. It's an experience. So as you're learning how to perceive you as you are, you have to be okay with accepting your relationship with being caring or not caring. Well, I just said something there which I don't agree with. You don't have to accept it. I said you had to accept it. No, you don't. You can take forever to accept it. The key is, first of all, you see it. Then you're engaged with life. And you're watching you, and you're learning how to just step a little to the right, or step a little to the center, or step a little to the left, or left and right is fine. But it's you learning how to do something slightly different. If you choose to. If you don't choose to, energy or love on a tremendously broad base throughout the whole of the universe, it seems as if it's so deeply inside of us as a glowing oscillation, an energy field, one could say, that will be called and is called God, called some particle, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't take away from the fact that it's functioning there for the purpose of engagement with life. This is a hard one to figure out, but anyway, it's that loving or that energy that comes through those valves or Zephyra, and they can be broadened very physically, broadened emotionally, broadened mentally, broadened beyond the mind structure or the so-called mental structure into a whole sphere of another level that can be perceived by us, either physically, emotionally, or mentally. At that level, we often call that spiritual. When you feel a glowing level of loving that you don't ever want to go away, but you allow yourself to engage with how you are, then it kind of dissipates because you're playing the piano or the typewriter or the, ancient days, the computer of your mind, emotions, and positional relationship with existence, with life, and you play that. You don't play it for those purposes. You play it as a form that's already constructed in a way that you might call good, bad, middle ground. You might call it that, but all it is you, and you're attempting to see you as you are with no negation to it, because we are held by this concept of we have to be this way, we have to be that way. If we're not that way, we're bad. And if we're not that, if we are that way, then, or another way, then we're good. And this has always been a very relative engagement with life. There's no ideal. Oh, that's a terrible thing to say out loud. If you focus on ideal, then you will bring out a set of tools that relate to judging how unable you are, as you begin to see more, to be ideal. If I talk to 100 people, there would be 100 different idealistically valued concepts that one has to entrain themselves to become. And when you reach an ideal of such, you will find it's not ideal. It's just another way to be. So, the idea of becoming consciously aware of that slowly begins to allow you to not fret as much, not be nervous as much about finding out that you're imperfect. There isn't anybody who is perfect. Because one culture will assess one way, another will assess another. One family will believe one way, another will believe another. One person that you know will think this way, and you will think another way. I've seen people just get rid of friends because they didn't think the same way. God forbid, relationships are really difficult because there are two people, not one. How can two people honestly think exactly the same way all the time? This is just nonsense. So, the seeing of these things allows you to construct a zone that is slightly different than the zones you've already constructed. And that will make you, but that new zone is a zone where you can broaden out and understand a little bit more, allow yourself to understand a little bit more about how you already are. I remember someone asking me, telling me they had to find out who they were. I said, wow, are you sure you really want to do that? Now, normally that's worth a laugh, but it implies that there's something wrong with it. You don't have to go anywhere. You just have to see better. And there's nothing wrong with who you are because that's what you constructed and that's what you believe you need to be. And you protect that. Learning that you protect those things is then worth a slow movement towards softening down the protective nature or the protective need combined with an assessment, which is supposed to lift you up because you know keeps you in charge, you see. You're not in charge of anything. Your habitual engagement, you've already trained, and that becomes the thing that's in charge of you. You're an individual. You have the right to be okay with you, and you have the right to engage with you and attempt to soften that relationship, those ridges, just a little bit, so that you can penetrate the zones, so they can begin to broaden a little bit. The previous way of constructing doesn't want those zones to be penetrated, because if you do that, it means That whole zone is not in charge of what you do. It will always be there. It doesn't get annihilated. But what it does do, it learns how to welcome in different things than what it already believes should be there. Now, you remember, already believes is not something I'm talking about in terms of you being conscious of. That's an emotional belief about the validity of how things need to remain the same so that you can feel comfortable. And that is not a judgment. That's just normalizing for you and I. The other question that comes up here is very interesting because there's been a number of people talking in and around this subject matter. I think I would maybe like again to touch on this because it keeps coming up. Ultimately, and maybe in December when we have another seminar, I'll try and be a little bit more explicit about it, and that is the idea of initiation. And there are so many thoughts on this. And if you've never been involved with one, then these ideas are only thoughts and they're options. It doesn't mean they're true. It means they're beliefs. Now, we know how important beliefs are. Ours are important. And as a matter of fact, they're vital. But they're baby steps towards an actual experience that goes way beyond our natural, normal modes of engagement with life. However, I've said this before, the creativity of the human mind is unbelievable. An actual engagement with a higher state leaves the individual completely vulnerable. But also, it opens doors to things that are difficult to take in. Well, let me just talk about this part where Sonia talks about I was waking up from the dream about love and not so loving orientation, good and bad in all of us, whatever that means. If a person is kind to me and I grumble about the way they're talking, they may be faking it. No, they might be really honestly being kind. And it looks like it's faking it to me. The flaw's in me. The flaw's not in them. If they are faking it, then they're doing it for a reason relative to their own personality orientations. Then I need to be able to understand that that's what they're doing. But if I don't think I need to bother about that, I just judge them for it, then the flaw's on me too. And the flaw is in me because I'm the judge of it. One could say, I am protecting myself against seeing the times in me when I'm faking it. Another way to look at it. So these are characteristics of an engagement with life. And these are not rare. These are common things. Take a look. Just for a week, a day, 15 minutes around 3 or 4 people, and you'll see it. That is neither good nor bad. It's part of what we do here on these planes to align with and form a composite of others around us. And we also have a composite internally. And our relationship with that composite is physical, emotional, and mental, and the coming together of those things and an interaction with other states. And it's plural. It is not only one state. There's many levels of these things. Okay, it's an idea. So she said, as I was waking up from this dream, I had a feeling of a tension in my body that looked like the Great Wall of China. That's those ridges I was talking about. I mean, they're just energetic and they're tighter, they're firmer. I felt like it was stopping the love that I have inside me from reaching the whole of me. Let's take a look at that just for a second and let's call that kind of physical, close to the body. And we all have personality levels of engagement that we will go to. It's our go-to, where certain things we can allow ourselves to function with, and other ways of functioning are, under certain circumstances, not for us. So one of the things is that to recognize is that our physical body that is linked with emotion and linked with mind, but our physical bodies in our minds and in our life need and our personality, a kind of protection physically. If we're from one kind of culture and someone gets too close to us, we will take a step back. So some people, if they understand that, then they move towards you like this to make you step back. Well, the dilemma with that is you will step back, but the other person is manipulating. But if that's a characteristic of them, then they believe that that characteristic is of value to them because it puts other people in awkward positions. That makes them feel better because they're so vulnerable. They need to feel better. And it's of value to them to have someone less comfortable than they are because they're uncomfortable deep down inside. So trying to understand that is a whole different thing, but then understanding it, but then allowing yourself to be active in that place where you can be calmer inside. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is that you're going to respond the normal way that you would. And that would be normal for all of us. Then that creates a kind of movement inside of us so that we're, let's say, putting a little framework or boundary or wall around us. So that would be, under certain circumstances, that would be where we hold things. Inside, we try to do that, hold things. And then she says, then I felt that I have another wall just off my body that stops me feeling love and receiving love from those close to me. So this is kind of really interesting because if you can allow yourself to be okay with this, then you'll begin to understand you have a biased rendering of how loving between people, family, should be like. It has been presented to you. You have seen it in other families. Certain ways to attend to family members. And that is copied reflexively inside of us for the purpose of making sure that we have a particular kind of space, familial background, or others that you have seen. You can see it even in the workplace. There'll be certain workplace values, and you cross them or you don't cross them. You engage with them, and you don't even think about them. that's kind of a separate family, and that has an impact on your own family background. You add an additional level, and we're just going to talk about that, and it builds a little emotional, I won't call it a stop. If I called it a stop, it'd be like a governor, on a bus that doesn't allow it to go past 100 kilometers an hour. They put these holders or governors so that you can't speed. It's better to do this as a whole, because if you go over that, then it pushes the other person away. If you give them too much love, they back away. Give them a little bit less love, they come towards you. This is a reflexive thing that happens in families all the time, and there are family rules about this. Check your traditions. See what your tradition speaks about how you should engage with another, and for what purpose and why, or is it okay? Checking your family tradition will bring some interesting responses. Then Sonia mentions again, then she felt a wall even farther off the body that creates a barrier between me and others I don't know. Once again, this barrier is a part of emotional, physical, and mental orientations that relate to allowing you to find the right space. And there is a plus or minus, if you're doing a research project and you're trying to figure out just how is it possible that this particular thing might work? It'll work, but there is a little bit of a plus or minus 10 or 15% there that we're not just sure about. In fact, really letting go of loving and having it move in, and your focus is only on loving, is very difficult for us on these planes, because we have rules about we don't want to be taken advantage of. We don't want to be hurt. Count the number of times you've been hurt when you cared for someone and they did not care back. It's not their fault. They couldn't. Or they could only care in a certain way. And if that pleased you that particular way, you were okay. If it didn't, you're less okay. And there was assessment going on by the other person, and of course, assessment going on by you, whoever you are. I'm not talking about Sonia, I'm talking generally here. So these are three wondrous embankments. They're reflexive. They have nothing to do with being a good or bad person. They have everything to do with survival. And no negation is involved with this. None whatsoever. It's just reflexive response, taking the measure, unknown. You don't take it consciously. You take it reflexively, unconscious. People would say, well, we don't like the idea of unconscious, but you have a tremendous amount of engagement with life that is reflexive. Because the actual engagement with life is energetic in nature, and no one hardly, well, there are some, but hardly anybody can perceive that energy coming into them at the level of those chakras, and then allow that energy to come in as an act of love, and the energy comes into them, and they are, for a second or two or 10 or whatever, they are that person that they are engaged with Now, that is a really deep level of loving, not related to our personality at all. Personality then is just a shell, a receptacle, a kind of concave mirror. But it comes in, and when it does come into us, we have no conscious awareness of it happening. And that's why it's important to have that conscious awareness that it's happening. And we don't know that half the time we are acting like them. We don't have an awareness of that. Why am I acting like that? Ah, that's interesting. They must have an aspect of them that's like that. That's not all of them. That's an aspect of them. It's not good enough for judgment or assessment, perfectly oriented. But there again, we have a personality that is practiced in judgment and assessment. It will attempt to assess a person based on how that makes you feel, meaning this: your response to them is a view that you have about what's in you or about what you read in terms of how they're functioning. And in fact, it could be really well off based on whether you're consistently, overtly judging others so that you don't have to allow yourself to care for them because you have too much love in there. So much love in there that it hurts you every time you care. So instead of doing that, you reflexively protect you. And that protection plays out inside of you. And if you could be able to watch it, you don't have to comply with it. You can say, oh my goodness, this is my assessment of what's going on. So that's what it feels like. Not negative, but kind of an apparatus that can be learned from, and a recognition that it's really basically difficult to learn. That's why growing is so slow, because we're not conscious about the fact that we can help us little by little, not big jumps like this, because this concept of big jumps can only be handled, or would only allow you to have that big jump, if you can basically find a balance that would be emotionally okay, physically okay, and mentally okay. Otherwise, the slow steps enable us, help us to learn. So this dream is trying to show that it's not a flaw that you can't love in an idealistic way, because we can't handle so much love coming in and through us. It would make us feel so vulnerable all the time. So as love begins to operate a little bit more through us, then what begins to happen is we begin to become a little bit more internally focused than externally focused. We have to be careful of that, because there needs to be a balance between an external focus and an internal focus. And slowly, we begin to learn how to watch outside and inside at the same time. There's no outside, inside, it's all one, but our focus is on the outside. Therefore, and we go to the inside when we are protecting ourselves, and we come up with answers that relate to someone else being a problem. I can definitely see that is a way of surviving, and that is not negative. It's part of what we do here in our human world. So negation of that is not real. Oh, it's real based on your bias, but your bias is not ideal. So learning slowly is very helpful. Okay, let me just try it. This notion of a wall is new to me, Sonia says. And is it energetically real, or is it an idea of an image that is being provided to me to encourage me to do something? I believe it is real. It's my, you could say, relative perception. And what is that something? That something is that's slow and easy. You allow yourself to be okay with you, both the the uh, the good and the bad, so-called, and the middle ground. So little is talked about this middle ground. And that brings up another subject, but maybe I should try and finish this. And if I make a connection back to the dream, does it have to do with forgiveness? And what role does forgiveness have in spiritual growth? And who am I forgiving? You're actually forgiving yourself for not understanding that as you are okay. You're fine, except what you're doing is trying to be helpful to you. Okay, I'm going to say this. Please don't take it as a harshness. Look at, we are given a small child. Us. I am given me. You are given you. How we would treat that small child is how we protect ourselves in a kind of a way. Now, what do you mean by that? Okay, it's a good question. What I mean is this. You are the parent of that child. You love that child. But you see that that child is not perfect. And for all of you who think you're perfect already, you're in for a shock. For all of you who think you're really bad already, you're in for a shock because you're not always. And those of you who are idealistically important, you're not always important. Matter of fact, the very act of presenting that way makes you not important. But we've all done it. And we do it in our own way. So this small child, you don't even know you're a part of until suddenly you start to notice, whoa, what was that? Why did I react like that? Well, this is interesting. What? Oh my goodness, look what I do. This is very fascinating. Now you're seeing the small child. The small child is a copy of what a human being should be. And it's in a portfolio, has a portfolio. There is no limit to it. Either way, from one extreme to the other. But it is a continuum. For those of you who might not understand what I mean by that, is you go from 0 with a number all the way along the line, notation of every number into infinity. I know there's no number called infinity, so you don't have to call me and tell me that. And there's no number really that's 0, because if you have a graph, 0 is in the middle of the graph, and we call it 0, but it's still there. So here's the deal. Everything that you are inside of you is on a continuum. Everything. My expression, the words I use, method of teaching, whatever, me or you, is on a continuum. Some days out of 10, it might be a 5 or a 6. From your point of view, it might be a 2. From mine, it might be a 9. From you, it might be a 4. The problem is, what I am that day is what I am that day. The problem is what you are that day is the assessor of that continuum. But on that assessment capability of yours, you are on a continuum. Your reasoning for being in a certain way, you might say you're a 9 because you catch this and understand this and all the rest of it. But on that continuum, you're nearer to 0 because you don't, in terms of understanding, you have no idea what's over here inside of me. Absolute 0, meaning 0.24. This doesn't mean that you're good, bad, right, or wrong. It just means, hey, look, this is where my little child needs to be for me to feel more valued under these circumstances. Because I don't like agreeing with something that doesn't necessarily agree with the things I agree with. And there's no negation there. But it's the way we are. It's the way we have learned to be and the way we will continue to be for some time as we learn how to bring up our relationship with us into a place where we can attempt to be willing, just attempt to be willing to understand what we do and realize that what we do is where we're at right now. That's what we are. What we need to feel is that we're doing something that is a treasure all the time. In some people's views, I don't think that that's a very important way to be. Although, when I take a look at sports, I would like to be on the upper side of doing well. However, it doesn't always happen that way. Good metaphor, actually. And what is that something? That's something in relationship to the notion of the wall is new to me, energetically real, or is it an idea of an image that's being provided to me to encourage me to do something, just to pay attention and learn? I don't always agree with experiments in science. Sometimes I think they're really they have an overemphasis on doubt. But then if I look at certain things that I want to be sure is real before we get involved with something, I don't want there to be doubt. For my physical body, for something that I'm perceiving and trying to understand. But I know there will be doubt. And we have to think of life as on a continuum as well. Because doubt is natural to us. It's very interesting. Sometimes we agree with something and we have no idea why we agree with it. It's okay to ask that question. Why am I agreeing with this? Maybe you can figure it out. An automatic agreement doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's wrong either. But asking a question in relationship to an engagement with love, then the question has to be, why can I not allow more love to come into me, pass through me, towards others that may help them to be touched by a willingness to have love go through them so they can touch others and not assess how it touches other people based on the personality's previous idea about someone loving them and you loving them. There are many definitions of loving, and we're held tightly to them naturally. From one extreme, not so uh, valuable, to other extremes where it's extremely valuable. These are strange times. We sit with a virus, and it allows us to have more time to meditate, and we don't do it because our intensity is focused on self-protection. We are protecting how we are because it's all we know. And we're learning a little bit about, is it okay for me to be okay rather than vitally the most important person in the universe? And the question has to be, yes, it's okay for you to just be you. Then the idealism can fall off a little bit, whether it be in the negative side of things or the positive side of things. No perfection is going to be there. But can you enter into a state where you can notice loving in you and not want to move because you might be desperately afraid, and that'll do the trick. That'll make you move. Desperately afraid that you might miss that loving feeling. Well, that loving feeling can be there in 1 second. And then the next second, you're really nervous about it being there. That nervousness has been really important to you. It's been of great value in relationship to engaging with others and dealing with very difficult subject matter in life. Sometimes very well, sometimes not so well. Sometimes in the middle, really okay. There's no perfect answer. One answer fits all does not exist. And that's a key to remember. So devaluation in tremendous sincerity means remaining the same. That's very interesting. You don't have to agree with that one. I'm not sure I agree with that one. I have to think about that one. But if it's protective, the question of asking, what is it protecting, is a fair question. And is it okay to do that in this 1 second? Absolutely. Otherwise, how can you ask the question? You won't even know what it is you're asking about. Be okay with that. Knowing who you are and what you are is it more important just to know that you are? It's a question that might be valuable. And therefore, can you allow yourself to go somewhere with that question that is not negative? Perhaps just a a very interesting way of seeing the world, one could say, but also another way of piercing through some of the rigidity that we all have. It seeps back in because we're engaged constantly with vulnerabilities. A person may not have even known we were vulnerable because they never thought of it prior to this period of time. Now they know they're vulnerable. But deep down, you always knew you were vulnerable, and internally, you were self protecting somehow. And that love gave you the juice, the intensity to self protect, unknowingly to you, and more now, a little bit more knowing. Be okay with you. Today, if you don't have the virus, you don't have it. That's what you focus on. But it's a continuum. And we know what we know. And that means we know that we have to protect against not practicing how to protect. It's not real. You have an automatic system. You will reflexively protect in spite of thinking you don't. Just a last couple of things. This penetration of the boundaries comes with letting go. And over time, higher states, literally, as you are able to allow yourself to watch and see and not react and act out in it in the way that you've done before. It doesn't matter what kind it is. Suddenly, there can be a reflexive moment where one of those boundaries can be perforated just enough to allow energy to move through it into another phase of an engagement with the level that you're in. And the level you're in physically or emotionally or mentally or how you perceive personally or even the allowance of an understanding of the perceptions that are the energy that's coming into you from others. That is a huge step. Learning how to soften is very helpful. So I hope that clarified. There's a couple of questions, one from Natalie and one from Sonia that were there. And I had another one from Michelle, and next time I will try and, Michelle Laramie, and I will try and talk to it. Thank you very much. And let's meditate for a bit. Good night. Hope everybody is okay. Take care. Now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding. And take care, everybody.